Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat Five segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. Hello. Welcome back to Big Fat Five, a podcast financially supported by Big Fat Snare Drum. Today's guest is Curt Bisquera, or as most people know him, Curky B. He's played with so many great artists such as Elton John, Mick Jagger, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Sarah McLachlan, Lana Del Rey, Johnny Cash, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. His pocket is deep and his stories are endless. I brought him on the show to break down the top 5 moments in his career that best represent his legacy as a player. From moving to LA to pursue a career in drumming at MI as a young kid who couldn't even read sheet music, to eventually playing the biggest stages in the world, Curky B is a man who takes opportunities and smashes them out of the park. His mixture of being at the right place, the right time, with the right information to nail the gig and stand out is a common theme. Do your homework, play to the song, know the technology of the day, and be more like Curky B. Now you don't even have to listen to the show. But please do. Enjoy my chat with Curky B. I do have to say, your career reminds me of, you know, that Chris Farley, it's the Chris Farley show on SNL, when he's sitting there and he's like, remember the time you played with blank? That was awesome. Because you've played with you play with all the greats. How do you balance wanting to say what you want to say as a drummer and then also, you know, balancing when that particular artist wants you to shine versus just do what's on the record? How do you evaluate how that process goes for you?
Well, it's certainly about, again, serving the music and being there, whether it be in the studio or live. So it's always about being able to have the arsenal, the toolbox, if you will, to pull it out whenever you need the monkey wrench, the crescent wrench, the screwdriver, the hammer, and you know, to have the facility to bring it, or to have the facility to completely have the wherewithal to just completely lay out and play nothing. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I can't stress that enough. You know, sometimes the best drummers are the drummers that are just sitting in the back playing nothing.
Absolutely.
And it's like, that to me is like the complete circle of a musical drummer, like the guy or gal that could just sit there and not play anything, yet say everything.
Absolutely.
And I've always wanted to achieve that level, and I'm still in my mind thinking I need to do that. But it's just like, if I could play less notes and make the same amount of money, I'm down.
Sounds pretty efficient to me.
Yeah, it's all about efficiency.
Yeah. And so we had you on the show. I mean, it's called Big Fat Five. And so sometimes people bring in the top 5 influences they had. And for you, I was really excited. You actually are similar to James Gadson, which, again, there'll be another tie-in later, that you wanted to talk about 5 moments that really sum up the span of your career and big moments that made you into the drummer you are today. And so I was really excited that that's the angle you took. And so we can just jump right into the first one, which is your first pro gig with Morris Day and the Time.
Yeah, man. Well, I was attending a Musicians Institute at the time in 84. I started in 84 at Musicians Institute, PIT. And it was toward the end of graduating. It was a year-long course at the time. And so I joined in September '84 to go to school there, and then this was August of '85. So yeah, a month prior to graduating. I was walking the hallways in school, and the talk in the hallways was, "Hey man, the guy from Purple Rain, the movie Purple Rain,
Yeah,
the singer in the band The Time, he's auditioning at SIR down the street." I was like, "Oh my God." So being a big fan of Prince and The Time and Vanity Six and that whole Minneapolis scene, I had to go down there and at least scope out what was happening. So I went down there, and sure enough, he was auditioning drummers. It was a cattle call. There was like 50 drummers there. And, they had a list of drummers, you had to sign up and be on the list. And I was the last guy, and it was toward the end of the day. So, I knocked on the door, and I was like, "Excuse me, but can you put me on the list?" He's like, "Well, we're all full for the day." And I was like, "Well, I won't take much of your time, but I know Morris's music. I could do this, take you 2 seconds." He's like, "All right, we'll fit you in." So sure enough, I was like drummer 51, and I was the last one for Morris to see. And I went in and auditioned on 2 songs, The Bird, which was a really big hit in the movie Purple Rain, and Jungle Love, the other one.
of course, yeah.
So I auditioned on those 2 songs, and I could see Morris's head going back and forth. And I thought, okay, something's going on here. Either he's digging it, or I don't know, he's hungry and tired and wants to go home.
Exactly. That's where my brain would go. He's obviously not digging it. What else is he bobbing his head for? Yeah.
Right. So then he's like, "Okay, we'll be in touch." I said, "Well, okay, cool, but can I play 777-9311 for you?" And he goes, "You know that?" And I was like, "Yeah." So he goes, "All right, go ahead." And so the musical director, Freeze, starts playing it on keyboards, and I start busting out the beat, and Morris's head starts going back and forth like big time, and then we play through it, like 3 or 4 minutes, and then we stop, and then he peeps over his shades and goes, "You want a job?" And I said, "Yes."
Yeah, totally.
And so that's the story of my professional beginnings of a drummer in Hollywood.
So can you describe like the setup for someone that hasn't, and me, because I've never gotten a job via a cattle call. It's always been networking and can you describe when you walk in that room, is it him sitting in the back as you described and then just the music director on a keyboard, or is there a backing track you play to? Like how back in those days did you play those songs?
And, I've auditioned for a ton of bands, and back then, because it was so ample, you could go to any rehearsal hall in LA and there was always a tour going on, or some band that needed a drummer. So then it was just the band was there, and they'd have you come in and play down the tune with the band. There weren't tracks back then, there weren't computers back then, there weren't iPhones, or what was then? There wasn't even CDs, cassettes. but it was like, this is late 80s, early 90s. So yeah, it was just the band there, and you'd go in, and it was all about not only just your ability to play, but it was a look, it was a vibe, a certain feel. Luckily at the time when I got Morris's gig, it was kind of fashionable to be a Asian drummer that could play funk. That kind of helped. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I guess it was an oddity or something at the time, but back then, musicians relied upon each other to be able to either audition or make a recording or go in the studio or whatever. It was more like a family oriented feeling, like a gang. You would show up and there you are to make the music happen.
When you were looking at the list of drummers, were there any drummers you saw? Not that you have to name any, but were there any ones that you saw? You're like, oh, well, he got the gig or she got the gig.
Oh, dude, they were heavies. There were heavies there. I won't name them, but
yeah.
there were heavies, and I was convinced. I was like, well, this punk kid from Santa Maria, California, he's not going to get it, you know?
Yeah.
And sure enough, I did, and the rest is history. And, you know, that's why we all moved to Los Angeles or a big city, you know, New York, Nashville. We all want to make it big and succeed in our art, you know?
Yeah.
So I never, ever tell anybody it can't be done, because I'm living proof. You know, I did it, and like thousands of others have, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's just drop in actually a few for people who might not have heard of Morris Day and the Time. Let's actually drop in a few songs. I picked two of them. Jungle Love was one of them, but the first one, I love the intro, the drum beat is The Walk.
Ooh.
So I was that's a fun one. So let's just play, maybe the first few bars of The Walk. All right, so that's from the album What Time Is It, which I believe is the same album that has 777-9311 on it.
Yeah.
And this next one's Jungle Love, which is probably the more commercial hit of them.
Yeah, definitely.
And those like flams coming in. Dut, 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 dut. All right, so go check out The Time. Go see Purple Rain. I mean, they're part of that movie.
So funky.
Exactly, very good stuff. And so I could be wrong, but I thought I saw in a previous interview you had. Did Morris Day, was he the one that gave you the nickname Kirky B, or was that something beforehand? Or
you know, it all kind of came crashing down on me from the time I was a baby.
Okay.
Because my Filipino grandmother couldn't say my name, Curt. She could only say Kurk. And so she would rub my cheek and go, Kurki, Kurki, Kurki. So then there's that. And then fast forward to Morris and calling me Kirky B. And also Jeff Picaro calling me Kirky B. So it just all fell into place, unbeknownst me, you know, and it just... Yeah. Because I've been called that all my life, I guess it just manifested itself into that.
Yeah.
And so that's my name, even though my real name is Curt, C-U-R-T, you know, Kirky B is the nickname, and I'm stuck with it.
Well, there are worse things to be stuck with. It's an awesome little nickname.
Totally. So. Thank you, man.
All right. So number 2, and this is kind of ties into another thing I was saying with the Chris Farley thing. You played with Elton John for a while. So
yes, I did.
I mean, that's a great number 2 in the span of your career. So let's talk about how you got hooked up with Elton John.
Let's see. Dear friend of mine, Greg Penny, was producing. He's been a producer for a really long time here in Los Angeles, and he called me to play on a duets record, Elton John duets, and so I played on that, and there was a few songs that I played on that he produced. And the duets record, it was with one with Little Richard, one with Katie Lang. The one with Katie Lang is the opening track of that record, called Teardrops. And so I was introduced through Greg Penny to Elton that way, by playing on that record. And then one day I got a call from Elton himself saying, hey, do you want to go on tour? And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. Who is this? Sorry.
Yeah, right. And it was a dream gig, because he wanted to do a double drumming tour with both myself and Nigel Olsson. So it was like a dream come true, right? Like, to be playing double drums with your hero.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, we played Madison Square Garden, and that's available on DVD, and I think there's a bunch of YouTube clips on that.
Okay.
But yeah, got to play Madison Square Garden with Elton, and we did one other gig in Pennsylvania. And there was supposed to be a world tour with that, but unfortunately, Elton was going through some legal stuff with his ex-manager.
I remember
there was
that,
some sort of legal battle thing, and so unfortunately, the tour got cut short, obviously, and yeah, that would have been such a fun tour to do. But to play double drums with Nigel Olsson, come on.
In Madison Square Garden and have it recorded so you can reference it and enjoy that memory.
Yeah.
That's great.
But to have toured the world, I think it would have been just extraordinary,
Yeah. How would you describe Elton as a boss when it comes to how particular he was with the drum parts he wanted? Or is that more from Nigel that kind of guided you?
Quite honestly, it's the songs that guide you. Those songs play themselves.
Yes, they do.
I remember playing the whole set with Elton, and just that arc and that curve of not only a timeline of music, but it was a timeline of my life.
Oh.
Like, oh my God, I remember this in 7th grade, and okay, 8th grade, I got my second skateboard, and everything kind of just arced into this life frame, if you will. And so, because those songs are all so iconic, the drum parts you can't really mess with.
Mm-hmm.
They are what they are, and especially when Nigel plays, it's outstanding. And Elton, being the consummate musician and music lover, and he knows every style of music. Like he could sit down with like any style artist, EDM, drum and bass. He could sit with anybody and completely hold court because he knows a lot of music.
Mm-hmm.
So being in his band, it was really cool because he just appreciated great musicians. I'm not saying I'm great, but he appreciated.
I'll say you're great.
Oh, thanks, man. But he appreciated your contribution and your musicality and your musicianship. So that was a big plus in being in his band. And with him, you had to bring it because those songs, again, play themselves. And if you didn't know the song, it was pretty much expected that you know his music.
Sure.
As you should. He's like an institution.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's very few people that don't know his songs. I'm sure there are songs that are kind of deep cuts that you guys play live, but still. This is just a personal thing. What was your favorite Elton John song to play?
Oh man, all of them. And I'm being honest because again, it was a timeline of my life, so it reminded me of certain things. But also because, man, there's such great songs. He's one of our like great, pillars of artists.
Absolutely.
That he'll always stand the test of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was always a joy to play those songs with him.
I love it, and again to bring up Nigel. I mean, to just be on stage with him and just having to get inside his pocket and just, I mean, that's amazing. I'm so jealous, but also so stoked that you got to do that.
Oh man, it was so joyous. It's incredible.
Let me just, because I had a feeling you were going to say all of them, so I just chose Saturday Night. Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. I'm going to play a little bit of that because that is something that I still play all the time to try and get that syncopation, in the beginning of the song to get those right, and a lot of those open hi-hat kind of pushes and stuff. It's such a fun song to play and kind of ahead of its time in a lot of ways. So
yeah,
let's just play Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. You know what I noticed about that when I'm listening in my headphones right now is that they do something, and I've heard you talk about this. You and me are similar. We pan the drums from the drummer's perspective, and that song is panned from the audience's perspective. The hi-hats were in the right hand side.
Drives me nuts.
I'm with you, man. That's like such a nuanced thing, but it really is frustrating for me.
Yeah, if you want to start like a big brawl on social media, ask the question, drummer perspective or audience perspective, and man, you'll get thousands of people just like, oh man, it's got to be this way.
Well, one of my views, and this is kind of, and maybe you share this, that one of my goals as a drummer, while still being a servant to the song, you always want to have a moment in a song where people air drum along to your drum part, where like the most non-musical person just knows how to go da 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 da. Right. And if that's the goal, you want to do it from, the guy or girl in their car. They want to be behind the drum set. So you want to mix it as if they want to play it with you as if they're the drummer. So that was always my perspective. Everyone wants to be in the band when you're listening. But I get it.
Yeah, the steering wheel starts on the left.
Exactly.
And then you work your way to the dashboard to the shift knob, shift knob to the glove compartment. Yeah,
exactly.
Totally.
All right, so we can move on to number 3.
Come on.
All right, so this is going to be you when you played on the first Seal record.
Ooh.
All right.
Yeah. Wow.
So that was Wild, and then I want to play Future Love Paradise, and I'm going to start it at about the 55 mark, because that's when the drums kind of start kicking in.
Okay.
Don't you know that racism in among future kids can only lead to no good? Besides your sons and daughters already know how that feels. One day, all the crews will gather around, spreading love and unity so we can be found. But then the blue riders say it's all to do with drugs, women, gentlemen, but when your love.
All right, so that was Future Love Paradise, and the song before that was Wild from Seal's first record. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It brings back so many memories. I spent over a month in London at SARM West recording that record. And my dear friend Jamie Mahobrak brought me in to do that. And so the both of us were in a flat together in London and recording every day. And man, it's a groundbreaking record for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It broke a lot of ground, just way ahead of its time, I think. And it still stands up today. There's still a lot of spark there, I think.
I mean, that's in one of my notes I want to talk about, especially Future Love Paradise. That song, I mean, that's what came out in 91? 91, yeah. I mean, that sounds like the sound of the 90s, that record.
Yeah.
It's so progressive and so ahead of its time. And it's got a cool mixture of can drums. The whole record has can drums and real live drums, and the way it's mixed in, you almost can't tell sometimes. Is that them just really, focusing on the EQ and making it sound canned? It's really cool.
I'm going to show you the secret to most or all of those songs.
I love it.
Drum-wise.
I don't want to cut this out. I want to get the rumbling to people for the suspense.
Okay, so when I did the record, it was pre-Pro Tools. It was actually done with computers, sequencing, with me playing live drums on half of the record, live drums, and then the other half played on this.
There you go. Yeah.
Drumcat,
yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of those grooves I played on the drum cat, and it was triggering MIDI. And I still play this thing. I love this thing, man. I use it with Superior Drummer.
Sure.
And to me, this thing is still the best MIDI controller out there. I don't care what anyone says. It just is. It works,
We're starting a lot of fights here on this episode.
I know. But in terms of just controllability and the latency and all that, because you're not having to deal with sounds. It's just giving off triggering information. To me, it's the quickest out there.
Do you have a foot pedal? Is there? Oh, there is a foot pedal attachment. Okay.
Yeah. Well, the company went out of business, but the kick drum pedal is called a Fat Cat, and the other hi-hat pedal is called a Hat Cat. And it was made by, oh God, I forgot the name of the company, but he went out of business, unfortunately. But, I honestly don't know what other companies make controller pedals.
Mm-hmm.
But man, this was the magic combo way back when, and it still works,
Isn't Fat Cat? I mean, I think Neil Peart used a Fat Cat pedal on some of his stuff.
Yeah, he did, and he used the Pole Cat, I think, which was the black pole that you could mount on a stand, and it had 2 rubber pads on it, and you could trigger different sounds.
That's awesome. Yeah, it would kind of fit anywhere.
Yeah.
That's sick. Yeah, Eric Slick from the band Dr. Dog, who's a friend of the podcast, and he has been doing a lot of cool videos of putting like PVC pipe sounds on his drum cat and making really cool. I mean, it sounds like Michael Bay kind of soundtrack sounds. You're like, oh, that sounds like it could be like in some really like chase scene. It's the sounds are awesome, and they don't cut off each other. It just sounds really, really natural sounding.
Yeah, totally.
How would you? I mean, this leads me to my next question, because you're kind of the person to talk to about being really big in the recording scene in the 80s into the 90s. How was the transition from going from analog to digital? Was it a lot of people resisted it, or were people like you being like, oh, this sounds more efficient, it's cool, you can use it as an instrument as opposed to this thing that's making you feel, it's taking away all your feel? I'll stop putting words in your mouth, but how did the LA scene react to that, if you remember?
Well, I think they embraced it because there was so much recording going on back then, because there were still record labels, there was still artist development, there was still there was still labels, there was still an industry that supported music in a high fashion. So it was just a natural progression, I think, for it to go from 2-inch tape to record music on 2-inch to the digital format, because it made editing a lot easier, and it made the sessions go a lot faster. The first thing I remember is not having to wait for the tape to rewind.
Yeah, totally.
I was like, wow, really? We got to do it again? I'm just catching my breath. I just remember that being a weird thing, like not hearing, not hearing that, and going from like, okay, the end of the song to the beginning, go,
Now when you hear that, it's just the bass player talking, right?
Exactly.
All right, we'll be right back with the show, but I wanted to take a second to talk about Waves Audio. This podcast would take me so much longer to edit if it wasn't for the Waves Vocal Writer plugin. It rides the fader in real time and keeps both my and my guest audio at a consistent level without the need to overcompress. I also use an endless amount of their plugins for my musical recordings, such as Abbey Road Saturator, CLA Drums, the SSL channel, and many more. We're an affiliate member, so if this show has brought you any sort of value, the next time you purchase any Waves plugins, please use the link via the show notes. You directly support the show and little old me. All right, now back to the 5 ways to color in inside the lines. Bye. All right, so number 4 is huge to me, and it's when you got to play with Mick Jagger on his Wandering Spirit record.
Yeah.
So, and again,
I think it was his management that called and said, hey, Mick's putting a band together to record and tour, and he's holding auditions at the power plant here in Los Angeles. Can you be here at this time? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I showed up, and man, there were some heavies. This one guy I will mention only because he was the one before me, and we always tell this story, and I always tell it because I adore him dearly. But it was Stephen Perkins. He auditioned before me, and it was a hired kit. You know, it was one of the kits that they had at the rehearsal hall. And I was auditioning after him, and I went in there to audition when it was time, and the frickin' drum heads looked like satellite dishes. He was hitting so hard.
That sounds about right.
It was unplayable. And I tell this story all the time. It's like, yeah, man, Stephen Perkins hits hard. So, yeah, I think I had to like ask the management, hey, can I take 10, 15 minutes and replace these drum heads? You know, so the rehearsal hall, they had to get new drum heads and put them on there and tweak them up, because they were just unplayable after Steven got a hold of them.
I can see that as being a gamble, because that could either make you look, and I don't mean this in a bad way, because I might have done the same thing. Like, you can either go, oh, he's a diva, or he really cares, and and we like that. You know, something like that could be taken both ways. Obviously, it went in your favor, but yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, you want to represent yourself the best way possible, both visually and sonically. And
exactly.
When the drums sound like ass, you don't want to play on ass drums.
Sure, I'm with you.
I don't. I'll take the time out and change the heads. And
sure,
I don't think it's. I see your point though, of it being kind of diva-like, but if it sounds like ass, which it did, it was like, okay, I got to unass this.
Yeah. No, and of course, I wouldn't have assumed that. It's just I can see some music director like, drummers, they all sound it's going to sound the same whether it's new heads or not. You know, they could have that perspective. And like, just shut up and play.
Yeah, just shut up and play, because I'm going to sound replace you anyway. So
exactly. Yeah. So when you again, this is just more selfish for me. I try and get specific questions because they pop into my head. But when you go to a cattle call like that, do you reset up the kit to fit your body more, or you just kind of go like, I'm just trying to absorb the vibe of everyone else and sit down, maybe adjust the snare drum a little bit, but do you just kind of it's set up the way it is, just do your thing, or do you take the time and
all the auditions and sit-ins I've ever done in my life, I never touch the kit, only because it's like, A, I like the challenge.
Sure. B,
I don't want to mess it up for the drummer who's actually playing the kit, you know, all night. C, It is what it is, because you're there for that moment. And why like try to tighten or unloosen a wing nut and cut your knuckle on the hardware right before you play? It's like, I don't want to goof with that. Let me get behind the kit and play and split. That's all I want to do. But yeah, I left it pretty much the way Steven left it, in shambles. And I just played. Yeah. You know, I changed the heads, of course, but I played.
Yeah. And so what song did you play?
Well, I told this story before, and I'll tell you guys. You know, I was noticing all the drummers that were going into audition. You know, they were going in and playing all the classic Stones songs. You know, Paint It Black. You know, Brown Sugar. You know, every classic Stones song. You know, so Mick could check them out. So I was like, you know, how am I going to approach this when it's my turn? Mm-hmm. And I remember reading an interview that Mick was a huge fan and disciple of James Brown.
Oh, okay. Makes sense. Yeah.
And so me had played with Morris and, you know, already done the whole Morris Day thing and played funk with, you know, all the top funk dudes.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, if he's a James Brown guy, I'm going to surprise him with something. So it was my turn to audition. He said, all right, Curt, what song would you like to play? And I'm like, let's play Cold Sweat by James Brown.
Nailed it.
And his eyes just got huge. He's like, all right, then we'll play Cold Sweat, James Brown. And so we go into this 20-minute jam of Cold Sweat, and he starts doing the chicken dance.
Oh, yeah.
You know, he's sweating and starts getting into the whole Mick maneuvering, and just his dance, and it's just like, wow. And I'm back there playing Cold Sweat, and there's Mick Jagger singing Cold Sweat. So this goes on 15, 20 minutes, and then we end it. And he's like, all right, next week we start rehearsal. I'll see you then. Put on his coat, and he split, and I was like, I guess I got the gig. And
that's so awesome.
Yeah, the musical director looked at me and goes, all right, we'll see you next week. Welcome aboard. And I'm like, yes.
And so yeah, you actually have, I want to confirm this with you. It sounds like it at the beginning of Wired All Night. You actually are the first vocal you hear on that record. Am I mistaken?
That's me
right?
counting it off.
Let's just go ahead and play Wired All Night from Mick Jagger's solo record, Wandering Spirit.
I'm going strap on your boots. I'm going to sharpen my nails. I'm prep up real cute. I'm going to smoke up a storm and step into the night. I'm getting ready to burn.
That snare sounds so good.
Hey, are you shooting to kill? Hey, would I tell you a lie? We be slamming tequilas, popping high to Gene, and lose the chords and the kinks that are wrecking my life. Give me a drink, don't be talking so much.
I love it. And then I also want to play one more song from that record called Don't Tear Me Up.
Life is rich, but it's way too short. You make a lot of money, but you just want more. You don't need the pain right here in my heart, but I hate every minute when we're so far apart. It was love in a minute, it was love in a flash. It brings no pleasure, it's a stab in the back. Bring me no comfort, bring me no peace. There's a weight on my shoulder, it's a fatal disease. So don't tear me up. I don't ever wanna see your picture again. And don't poison my blood. Your face here no more.
Yeah, those songs sound like, especially that one, sounds like that was a jam. Like that sounds like a very live recording. That in order to write those dynamics on that song, that's just a bunch of people playing in a room
we
together.
did pre-production for that record. We rehearsed for a month before we recorded. So to get them tight, to get them live sounding,
In that album, we had him on the show earlier, but "Use Me" by Bill Withers is a song that was played on that record as well, which is, of course, James Gadson on the drums. And so I do want to play your version with Mick Jagger from that record right now, because I love that song. That organ line is so good.
Yeah, that's the great Billy Preston on organ and Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers on bass.
Oh, really? Did not know that. That's awesome.
Lenny Kravitz. Co-vocals.
The Chris Farley in me just wants to keep coming out.
My friends.
It's so fun to play that.
Yeah.
Keep trying to tell me.
You can tell Mick's having so much fun singing this song.
Totally.
You can hear his dancing in his vocals.
Truly. There's Lenny.
I didn't realize how much his delivery is very similar to Bill Withers.
Yeah, it was surprising that Mick and Rick Rubin wanted to do it in that fashion, kind of like the original. Because, I don't know, I always felt that it would have been way funkier to play on snare drum and make it little slower or faster, just to change the vibe. But, after all these years, it's like, it is what it is. It's great. It's a great song. It's sung both by Mick and Lenny. So can't beat it.
No, you can't.
If it ain't fixed, don't break it.
Amen to that. So you seem like a very relaxed guy. How do you get over the nerves of playing with, Mick is known for being in a band with some of the best rhythm section people in the world. How do you get over the fact that, you are obviously very proficient at your instrument. I love your pocket, but everyone has imposter syndrome. Everyone. How do you get over that element of, okay, I'm playing with Mick Jagger right now,
I fanboy out whenever I'm with great artists that I've played with through the years. I fanboy just as bad as the rest of us, but then I have that moment of realization of like, okay, I'm here for a purpose, and that purpose is to be the drummer. Mm-hmm. And so then I got to put on the professional face and the professional attitude and the all of that. But don't get me wrong, deep down inside, I'm like, oh my God. My God, that's Elton John right there. I can't even tell you, man, like Steve, I played behind Stevie Wonder. I played behind so many people, and inside I'm like, on the outside, I got the serious face on, like, sure, I'll play drums for you. And I got you, man. But inside I'm like, oh my God. I am, that's just, and I think that keeping that excitement keeps you fresh, and it keeps you inside the music. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I do want to talk one more thing about Mick Jagger before moving on, but how was riding with him and jamming with him? Can you describe a little bit of his nonverbal communication, like when you could tell he was really digging something? Because you were talking about the chicken dance or the rooster dance. What'd you call it?
I don't know what that is. What is that?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what that is, but that would happen if he was digging something.
Yeah.
And he would sway back and forth. That swagger that he does is just, every artist has their quirks. I call them quirks. When Elton was digging on something, he'd be hunched over and peeping over his glasses with a big smile.
Awesome. Yeah.
Mick would do his thing. And, Morris had his head going back and forth. So every artist, even in a band that you play with, your singer or whoever's fronting the band, you could tell their quirk, and you could tell what quirk makes them excited and they're digging it, or what quirk makes them not dig what you're doing, or they're not liking what they're hearing. That's one of the gifts of being a drummer, is that we are in the back. So we're perched in the perfect place to see the whole thing. The keyboard player, the singer, the guitar player, the bass player, the audience. So we get to read and watch what's happening,
Yeah.
And that's such an important aspect of being a drummer. And I can't stress that enough, to don't ever shoegaze as a drummer. Don't ever, you could look down and groove or whatever and get that going on, but it's always important to be looking around on the stage and around in the room if you're recording, and to capture the vibe and the essence of the music, because it's so easy to have headphones on or get into your own world when you're playing, that you forget that these other 4, 5, 6 people are there with you making music,
I love it. And before we move on to the next one, which is more of a jazz trio-based thing, I did want to, because we're going that direction, I saw a really cool video of you playing jazz drums with Joe Porcaro.
Oh,
and
man. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Joe as a teacher and just a mentor?
Yeah, him and Ralph Humphrey were the reasons why I went and moved down to Los Angeles to go to Musicians Institute. I saw that ad that they would run in Modern Drummer, and I was like, okay, once I graduate high school, I'm going there.
Yeah.
And, so he was really instrumental in me wanting to go to school. And also I really wanted to go so I could learn how to read. I wasn't a reader prior to going there. So I really wanted to get that together. And thank God, because while I was going there, his son Jeff was keeping an eye on me. And it was Jeff that got me into the session scene here in Los Angeles.
Man.
So, without Joe and Jeff, my career would have gone another way.
They are icons in the world of, I think maybe in the younger generation, more people are associating, I guess Jeff with drumming, but Joe's on all those Toto records. Joe's the father of Mike, Steve, and he's a huge part of that whole scene as well.
Yeah. He moved here, him and Emil Richards from Connecticut, and they made a name for themselves here in Los Angeles. And, when Joe moved here with, I forgot, he told me the story, but it was little to no money and 4 kids in a station wagon. And look at the legacy he's left behind, And the dude has played on a gajillion movies, a gajillion records. That's just him. Then you have his sons that played on a gajillion sessions, a gajillion records, and they had Toto.
Yeah.
So, that family alone has just been a big staple in the LA music scene for sure. And Joe, we lost him last year, and I'll always be forever grateful. He was a dear friend. We'd go over to his house, or he'd come over here, and we would just break bread. And half of the time was never talking about drumming. He became a dear friend, and I'm gonna miss him.
Yeah,
I'm gonna miss him.
Well, he's more so than any drummer, or a lot of drummers, his legacy through music's living on. You can, hear him every day. So
yeah.
Going on to number 5, which is your new band, is it pronounced Bisquedini?
Bisquedini.
All right, yeah, it's the Bisquedini organ trio.
Yes, it is.
And the website's biscodini.com, BISCODINI.
That's it.
And yeah, so you get to have a little more of your trio jazz chops. And I was listening to this prior to our conversation. It's really well recorded and really fun music. Fun titles too. You guys had some fun with the titles. Karen, Stay Home, which is, I'm assuming you're meeting the theoretical manager calling Karen.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the whole reason the name of the record is called Lockdown is that we recorded this record separately during lockdown when it started last year.
Okay.
So, the record was done separately. I would record the drums first and then send it out to the guitar player, John Chiudini, and the B3 player, Scott Healy. And that's how we recorded the record. And my dear friend, Bob Daspit, mixed it and mastered it. And, just a little bit of background about the band.
Yeah.
Scott Healy was the keyboard player for the Conan O'Brien show for 20 some odd years.
Oh, wow.
And John Chiudini's guitar player, who needs no introduction. This guy has been the musical director for Peggy Lee and Natalie Cole. And he's been on a ton of records, just a jazz giant. And then there's me. And then, so
who also needs no introduction, by the way.
Yeah. And so we just decided to make this record, separately and during the times, because we couldn't get together. Because, prior to the pandemic, we would play at the Big Potato in Los Angeles, as a trio and other places. But, it was looking dire, as it is for all of us, and still is, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, what are we going to do? And I was like, you know what? Let's make a record. We're here. We're home. What else are we going to do? So I just started off with the grooves and sent it out, and we came up with 10 songs on the album Lockdown, and it's available streaming everywhere. So check it out.
Yeah, let me play a few songs. There's 2 songs that really stood out to me, which is 2020 Shuffle and Canyon Road.
Okay,
and
cool.
Your shuffle on 2020 Shuffle is so filthy. You're so behind the beat, and it sounds so good. But let me just go ahead and play that for our millions of listeners.
That's my lame approach, trying to be Chris Layton.
Well, whatever you're doing is working, so here it is. right, that was 2020 Shuffle, and now let's go to
Yeah.
Canyon Road. Such a vibe. I gotta ask, what sticks, hot rods, what are you using on that song? Because those, it doesn't sound like brushes, obviously, but it sounds soft but has a tack to it. What are you doing on that song, Canyon Road?
Those are the Fusion Acorns from Vader.
Okay.
And just the way it was mixed, it was mixed far behind. And so it made it sound a little soft because I didn't want it to be overbearing.
Yeah.
And then that little loop that you hear at the front, that's a loop, a bossa nova loop from a Wurlitzer Fun Machine.
Awesome.
From Scott's keyboard in his living room. So, yeah.
Yeah, some of those even like the Casio drum loops that you have on like the cheapest pianos, if you play those and reamp them and stuff, they're pretty cool.
Yeah, they're fun, man.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I mean, the record sounds amazing, and you were talking about how you recorded that at home. Is that a newer venture for you, or how long have you been able to record at your own spot?
I've been doing home recording now. I was one of the last holdouts to do it, because I was under the impression, and I was like, oh man, there's going to be a renaissance of recording studios and labels, and every day and every year and every month I said that it was just studios closing, labels folding, everything just going away. Everything it just kept going away. So, I started, maybe 12 years ago, starting to record at home, and been doing it ever since. If there's a session to do outside of the home, I'll do it. Of course, not now because of the pandemic, but
sure.
when it was safer, absolutely. But yeah, I think it's the new way, because of us having to do Zoom and having to be lighting experts and camera experts and, do interviews over the internet, so we have to do music that way as well, till it's completely safe to get back on the road and get back in the studios and make music again with humans at the same time.
Well, speaking of recording for people, I mean, where can people find you? Because we'll wrap up the interview. Where can people find you? Because obviously you can get amazing sounds and you can record from them from your spot now. So how would people, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Well, just go to my website, curtbisquera.com.
Okay.
And there are links to all my ways you could get a hold of me through Instagram or Twitter. I also do drum coaching at lessonsquad.com. And if you need me to do tracks, just hit me up. Curt at curtbisquera.com is my email. And I work for burritos. Not really, but we'll figure something out, right?
Yeah. I'm not going to cut that out. So I'm sorry. You just screwed yourself there, Curt.
That's all right. Yeah, man. So you could also check me out on YouTube, Curt Bisquera, Kirky B, Drum Hacks with Espresso. So I give you some little drum hack tips that I do, along with some delicious espresso. What drummer doesn't love coffee?
Yeah. I think I mostly like the coffee for all the vanilla sugar I put inside it, but the coffee's a good afterthought.
Yeah, totally.
And I do have to say, I know I don't talk about, I try and avoid doing like the product placement with Big Fat Snare Drum on here, but you have been one of the early and consistent champions for us. There it is right there. And I can't express how much we appreciate you. I mean, to have you play our stuff is an honor, because you are so focused on good sounds, and it really means a lot. So thank you so much.
It's an honor and pleasure. And FYI, that whole Biscadini record I recorded on a 4x14 copper DW snare drum using the what's the OG donut? What's that called? Steve's Donut?
Steve's Donut, yeah.
Steve's Donut. I'm going to do a unauthorized plug right now for you guys.
Okay.
But seriously, using this Big Fat Snare Drum product, specifically the the snare muffles or donuts or whatever you want to call them. It just made so much sense that you guys came up with them, because we're all looking for, as drummers, we want that fat sound. And we're under the impression that you need, like an 8-inch deep snare drum to do so. But again, I use a shallow snare drum, finger tight, with one of these, a Steve's Donut, or, a full, what do you call the full one with no hole?
The original. That's the name of it.
Yeah. So the OG one like this, or the Steve's Donut, and you put that on a shallow snare drum, tuned down all the way, like finger tight, and you'll have serious obesity going on with your snare drum sound.
Morbidly.
And it may not sound that way, like sonically as you're playing it, but when you record it, oh my God, it's like complete like fatness.
And I do want to echo what you're saying there, is a lot of people don't realize when they put on anything in the studio, in this context, specifically a big fat snare drum, that don't go off what it sounds like when you're sitting above it from 2 feet away. Listen to how it sounds through a microphone. That's the sound you're going for, because more often than not, it sounds like crap in the room. Not just like a lot of things you do in the studio, cymbal stuff, whatever. Listen in the control room. It's different.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's a great thing to bring up, Ben, because, we think what we hear in on a record or whatever, we could achieve that on the kit live in the room. And it's only like halfway, because what you have to remember, there's microphones involved and compressors and EQ. So the best you could get it sounding in the room, then it makes it easier for the engineer or yourself to dial it in. But yeah, you're right. Half of the sound is you, and the other half is in the DAW.
Well, Kirky B, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
Dude, anytime, man. I had fun.
Have a great day, man.
You too. We'll talk soon.
And that's the show. Be sure to subscribe, and if you're listening on a platform that allows for ratings or reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, which means the show will get better and bigger, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'd be an OG listener that could brag to all your friends. Anyways, also, why don't you go ahead and check out bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all the socials. Just search for @BigFatSnareDrum and you will find it. This show is edited in part using iZotope RX8 audio editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at iZotope.com. Bye.